Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LOPvox Live with your host, The Ghost Scientist. Join in our exciting conversations that are educational, informative, and oftentimes entertaining. So without further ado, this is LOPvox Live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LOPvox Live with your host, The Ghost Scientist. Today we got an eccentric panel lined up for you, some exciting information. We've got our guests of the panel today being Liberty, Rush, Scarlette, Nolo, Stormy, and the Ghost Scientist. Today our discussion is about doom and what it means to our panel and our panel members. So Liberty, your discussion, the discussion today is about doom, so what exactly is your favorite doom story?
Well, my favorite doom, this is Liberty. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I've got kind of an ancient civilization type of doom that I like to research. Just recently, we had Graham Hancock, who is kind of really into researching the ancient civilizations and alternative history interpretations and stuff. He came out on January 10th and announced that they had found a pyramid in Bandung, Indonesia. What's interesting about this is they did some drill samples, and the initial drill samples that they did estimated that the structure was 3,000 to 5,000 BC, when it was constructed. Then they drilled a little deeper, and they found material from 9,000 BC that was obviously man-made. Then they drilled a little deeper, and they found 1,100 BC, or 11,000 BC, and at a depth of about 90 feet, they found drill cores contained columnar basalt. And that's the material from the man-made structure that was 20 to 22,000 BC. So that's pretty interesting. They've also had some discoveries at a place called Göbekli Tepe, which was estimated to be at about 10,000 BC. Of course, we're all familiar with the pyramids in Egypt, the pyramids that the Mayans built. We've got pyramids in China. There's also evidence that some of the Indians, some of the people that they found buried in the Chinese pyramids were white red-headed people, and they've also got legends of that in South America and around the globe in different areas. So it seems that there was a fairly stout civilization, like a pre-Diluvian age, before the flood, that might have been wiped out either by the flood or by the Ice Age or something like that. So that's that kind of the different things that I believe and research. This kind of ties it all in together.
So what exactly brought you to be interested in that specific doom story? How does that bring us to doom that might be happening today?
Well, it goes into what is being researched as kind of an occult history, as Jim Marrs put it, kind of a hidden history. Why are there artifacts that are being held in the Vatican, possibly, in one of their vaults? We've got rumors of the same thing happening in the Smithsonian, where someone finds like either giant bones in a mound somewhere, and they swoop in and shut everything down, take off with the goods, and kind of hide it underneath. Anything that kind of this is similar from what we might have seen in the Vatican, where they've got artifacts that might not necessarily jive with their worldview from a religious perspective. We've got the Smithsonian doing the same thing with what would be science. So the way it seems like it would tie into me is it seems like there's some type of conspiracy to keep what is essentially our history hid from us, and not exposing that information and giving us some type of an illusion that feeds in to either a governmental or a religion or an economic type of control scenario.
No, absolutely. And I think I'd like to open up the panel now. You heard what Liberty's doom concept, or what his doom theory is. What do you guys all think about it?
This reminds me of a short story called Nightfall, where the scientists of the time are finding all these remnants of ancient civilizations, and they're wondering what's going on. Now, a background of this planet is it's never nighttime. They have so many suns circling that it's always daylight. Well, the astronomers discover that there's a subtle pattern that every 10,000 years or so, the way that they line up is there's an eclipse, and it goes into total darkness. And to cut a short story short, is when darkness falls, the entire civilization goes berserk and tears itself down. This pattern repeats over and over again. It's sort of, I think that's probably why he wrote the story Nightfall, is that reminds me of this.
Well, Nolo, how do you relate? Do you see anything that what Liberty was discussing being something that people will actually see in this day and age, something that maybe we all will experience within our lifetime?
Maybe so. That sort of ties into my subject matter, which is going to be biblical doom. But yes, I do see signs of this.
So let's see, Rush, how do you see this? Like, where do you see this going? Like, have you followed this specific doom, or do you know anything about this specific doom, or do you have an opinion?
Well, thank you, Ghost. To follow up with Nolo, though, I'm still kind of looking forward to the future of things, and some of the things we're seeing today. It's not just biblical. It's that political agenda, the things that are happening that I think most people are basically, they're afraid to adjust to, because it does fall in that same category, though.
Oh yeah, I agree. Okay, so Scarlette, where exactly do you sit on this topic, the topic that Liberty brought?
I feel if we can learn one thing from this, it's that there have been catastrophes in the past that have wiped out civilizations that we know absolutely nothing about, and we don't know what happened to them. And it would be wise to find out what.
Oh yeah, wouldn't that be, especially if we could pinpoint like the actual languages, the actual archaeological finds, or if we could actually read the data that comes out of this, that actually physically came out of the research that was done. So, Stormy, how do you see all this going? Like, where do you see Liberty's concept of doom, of where it would be now in modern times?
Well, I think, honestly, the reason that this was covered up to begin with is probably because they don't want people to realize just how far advanced we were in the past. Like he gave the example of Göbekli Tepe, that is a site that they found radiation, high volumes of radiation at, as well as places where, like some other places in history, where people's homes were left like mid-dinner, and just people were cooking meals and then, they just vanished, disappeared. There's lots of places like that. It suggests that there was a sudden disaster. There were bodies, skeletons found that were laying, like as if they were all side by side. They all died instantly, suddenly. These things are covered and hidden up because they don't want people to know that this could come soon. Also, because there is a good chance that ancient aliens were involved in this. This is actually one of the big parts of the ancient alien theory, is that, they were there in the past. They've helped us in the past. That's how these structures were built so long ago. That's how we had the technology. Were they responsible for wiping us out back then? Maybe that's why it's being covered up, and maybe it could happen again.
Yeah, so, you're looking at bringing in, the concept of ancient technologies that have been hidden for a very long time. A lot of this stuff that's been covered by Credo and a bunch of other researchers, especially in hidden history, kind of anthropology, archaeology, and them trying to cover up the intelligence, the true intelligence of the findings that they actually first received. That's what we're discussing, and that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
So, I like where this is going. I like that, the beginning of this starts with ancient history. So that brings us to Rush. And, Rush, what is your, like I said, everybody's got this doom theory. Everybody's got their own doom hypothesis. So what is your top doom hypothesis?
Well, as I pointed out, Ghost, I'm still kind of like hung up in this the stuff that's happening now. This political mayhem. We're talking ISON. Some of this biblical prophecies that are happening, that a lot of people are saying are happening now. And a lot of that stuff is really hard to grasp for some people, but for me, I believe it's happening right now.
And where do you know if you believe it's happening like right now, right this instance? What are some of the things, like what is something that the listeners themselves can pinpoint, that they can look at, that shows them that gives them the concept that this doom is happening?
Well, that's a pretty heavy question. You know, we just lost Ariel Sharon as well. This just happened yesterday, and that's unfortunate because his background was so heavily invested in a lot of the separation that really took place in the Middle East. And a lot of the prophecies that I believe that I've been listening to over the past has to do with what's happening over there. Now he's gone. Now we have a new Pope, Pope Francis. Doesn't even like his shoes. So for me, that just kind of like blows my mind, because that, you know, they make those on a purpose. He's not wearing them. What's up with that?
So here, you know, I'd like to open up the panel once again to get your take on Russia's doom concept and Russia's doom hypothesis. So, Scarlette, how do you see Russia's idea of doom?
Well, to some extent, I agree with a great deal of it. I mean, there are things happening that have been prophesied that are coming to pass, and people do not recognize them for what they are.
And you know that brings me to Nolo. Nolo, how do you see Russia's idea of where this doom or the doom concept of his hypothesis is going?
Well, I see it like history. You drop a pebble into a pond, and the ripples spread outward from that. I think we see these cycles repeating several times. I mean, there's prophecies all over the map on cycles of destruction. And I think what we see is echoes of that in any generation, where they can take a look at a prophecy and try and fit it into their circumstances they see around them now. I mean, I think this is a common human thing, is to look at things in a perspective where this could all end at any moment. So you're going to look around at history, or current events, or geological processes, and you're going to look at them and say, oh, this seems to fit either the Hopi legends, or this seems to fit biblical legends, or some of the Mayan legends. All of these sorts of things is what we're picking up on is echoes of things like the original premise is we have all of these hidden histories, or undiscovered civilizations that we know nothing about. That this is just part of the pattern, the overall pattern. And like Scarlette says, we should be looking for a common denominator of what keeps knocking us down the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when you understand society as a whole and how they view their surroundings, whether that's political, theological, psychological, and trying to fit or contrive pieces of their own ideas and puzzles together and making a picture of that, especially when you're talking about prophecy, or especially when you're talking about theological prophecy. So, Stormy, that brings us to you. How do you see Nolo's concept of doom coming to light in this day and age?
Well, there's always going to be someone that's going to find signs in prophecy. I think I'm right on the same page with Nolo in that. I mean, there are and there have been prophecies since the beginning of time, and it never ends. And usually they're vague enough that, in some form, people are going to make connections to them because they want to see it. They want to feel that. Somehow we need that fear. People embrace fear to a great extent, and it's almost like it's comforting to them. And I'm not really sure why that is, but it seems to be something that's almost ingrained into the human psyche.
Yeah, and it seems like you're starting to see it more and more, even in the mainstream, even in television broadcasts, like TV shows that they're coming out with, that not only the networks and Hollywood movies that we're starting to see come out, that more and more these types of dooms are coming to the forefront, and especially in a mass media type way. And it's putting it in front of the public in such a way that the public is starting to wake up. They're starting to open their eyes to maybe some of these concepts, these doom concepts that they never knew existed. So, here, this brings us to you, Scarlette. So here, we got this doom concept. We got these doom ideas. We've got people believing in doom on a daily basis and being preppers and trying to get to the point where they're doing food storage and sheltering and creating security for their families. What is your doom that brings us to this day and age?
Well, I was going to consider Fukushima, but that's really for a show in and of itself because it's so extensive. So I'm going to bring up one that I don't think a lot of people have considered, and that's bee doom. That's the fact that the colonies are collapsing from some kind of disorder that nobody's sure about. If we don't have bees, we don't have anything to pollinize the plants, and that could wipe us out really quickly. There would be no oxygen. There would be no food produced because the plants weren't pollinized, and it's very difficult to go around and pollinize everything by hand. So if they don't get a handle on this, we may really be in trouble, and it'll hit us from behind where we never saw it coming.
Well, actually, you bring up an interesting one that I've done a lot of research in myself, being this bee problem, especially the mass die-off of bee colonizations, not only in North America but in Europe and in Africa, which is extremely interesting because the African bee colonies themselves, the majority of those bee colonies are secluded. They're in very secluded areas. But a couple of years ago, not to go off on a tangent about the bee thing, but I had a very good conversation with a beer that was at the fairgrounds here in California, at the state fairgrounds. And I was having a discussion with him and asking him, you guys, did you go through this process where you lost large amounts of bee colonies of your own? And they actually lost 1.5 million bees in their colonization, in their actual physical colony. And he went everywhere. He said, I spent so much time visiting laboratories to find out what the exact result and what the problems were. And he said an interesting thing that they found, of the findings that they came up with, was this specific virus that was killing off his bees in the strain. Back from the laboratory, said that the actual physical gene structure of this virus was very similar to that of autoimmune syndrome or autoimmune illness that humans get, but that being AIDS and HIV. And there was huge similarities to that specific gene. And to me, that was like, wow, really? I mean, how does that specific disease or that specific illness get put into these colonies? How does this happen without some outside source material being implemented or put in place in those colonies themselves, and then somehow pushing that so that it becomes a pandemic, really, a worldwide pandemic of such a great bee kill-off that you are now having farmers having to pay extravagant amounts of money, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes per field in their farms, just to be able to pollinize their trees, their fruit trees, their flowering plants on the ground, the ones that are supplying, especially in the breadbasket in the Midwest and here on the West Coast, where the majority of the vegetables and fruit plants are all grown.
Well, I live on a working truck farm, and I do know that they're having trouble with that. I mean, there are actually people who make a living raising bee colonies and going around to the farmers and bringing their hives to the various fields in order to fertilize them. And they're working overtime because they're losing their colonies, and they have all these contracts to fulfill. And, of course, the farmers are getting worried.
Oh, they're extremely worried. I spoke with one of the Blue Diamond growers here. Blue Diamond, of course, is a nut grower. They have tens of thousands of acres of land here in Northern California where they grow at, and they're having the same problem. In fact, they were having such a problem that they were having to truck bees in from overseas and bringing bees from overseas to try to help pollinate their fields here, and they were spending millions of dollars doing it.
Yeah, it's a very bad situation, and it's not being spoken about enough. I mean, you hear about it occasionally. I really haven't heard much on mainstream media about it at all, but that does not surprise me, since they don't report on things that are really serious.
Well, you did see some MSM on this when there was a massive bee colony that was lost in the Mid-South. And, of course, that was the time period in which they were talking about the Africanization of the honeybee, the North American honeybee, where they were trying to make a stronger breed. They were basically doing cross-hybridization of the African bee with the African honeybee, which is a very aggressive bee, in comparison with the North American honeybee, which is not that aggressive. And when they did that hybridization, where they were taking both strains and creating one set of honeybee that, of course, was supposed to be a hardier bee, was supposed to produce more honey, was supposed to carry more pollen on the tiny hairs on their legs and back in order to help in the pollinization of flower plants, so that they would get a higher yield. You know, that was the concept. And they tried to lay the blame basically on the Africanized bees being the cause of this specific die-off, you know. But when you had it happening in locations that didn't have Africanized bees, they had no real explanation. But the media did cover it to begin with. For just a few blurbs, if you will, they covered it, and that was it. That's all you heard.
The latest I heard is that they've had some success with taking an empty hive that they know is contaminated, taking the physical hive itself and irradiating it, and then putting a new colony in there, and that colony seemed to do all right, but it doesn't seem to solve the problem, because as soon as they get out and about and do their job, they seem to come down with it.
Yeah, almost as if they're picking up this viral bacterium or this virus itself, or illness or disease, from the plants in which they're pollinizing, which takes you to a whole other subject.
Indeed.
I mean, now you're talking about GMO doom, you know, and pollutant doom, or possibly even the cause of chemtrailing and having them leave behind chemical traces in the plants and the pollinizing of those plants, and the bees picking it up and taking it back to the colony. So that also, I can see definitely where that doom comes into play to this day and age, now.
I see also a pattern of species die-off, where a while ago it did hit the mainstream for a bit about all the frogs were dying, and now we have all the starfish dying. There seems to be, I don't want to say a selective pattern, but there does seem to be a pattern of species die-off that's increasing.
So, Rush, where do you see, now Scarlette put out the information about these bees. I mean, do you have an opinion about what you see this happening today, like where this would affect us today? Or have you done studies yourself?
I have looked into this a little bit, because looking at the USGA, the agricultural department, we've lost at least 20% of our gross product based on this problem right now. We're talking blueberries. We're talking apples. I live in the Northwest, so this is a big deal here. If we're not going to have that productivity, we're losing so much productivity in the U.S. alone. So, yeah, it's a really big deal.
And Nolo, where do you see? I mean, you of course chimed in on this, so I take it you have an opinion about this as well.
Well, I see it as one of those factors where it's part of an overall pattern. It's not to get into my topic ahead of time, but it has to do with an exponential curve.
Okay, and how do you see this exponential curve in the concept of the bee colony or the bee colonies themselves, the pollinization of the plants coming into play in that?
Well, I think of it more as it's a cascading effect. Okay, you already pointed out that when the bees don't pollinate, then the food crops go down, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's a cascading effect if, say, for instance, the frog population dies out, or another species that's dependent on another species. This cascading effect could really, in other words, a doom that might normally with one species dying off gradually might take several of our generations to say, oh, yeah, now we've got an impact. But if you have a cascading effect of several species dying off, then all of a sudden you've got stuff hitting you from left, right, and sideways. I mean, I have heard, no, I haven't really got any credible links to it, but I've also heard of a plankton die-off. Now, if that goes, that's at the keystone of a food chain. If that goes, we're in serious trouble, because everything from oxygen to food to the makeup of our atmosphere goes when that goes.
Well, yeah, because you're talking about close to 63% of the world's oxygen being created by that worldwide.
But let me add to this, though. How many times did that happen over history that we're aware of, that they even let us know about?
Well, and there goes like the cover-up. You know, where do you see the government stepping in and covering up this information so that the general public doesn't actually receive this information? And that brings me to Stormy. So now, Stormy, where do you see this bee doom, if you will, coming to play now?
Well, my question on this topic is there are companies that are greatly contributing to this, and they are fully aware of the fact that they are contributing to this. And as a matter of fact, they are suing other people because they're opposing them in contributing to this bee kill-off. So you have to wonder at this point, if they know what they're doing and they know the repercussions that this is going to cause, why are they doing it, and what is their ultimate goal behind it? Because obviously there's something going on here. When you find out that you're doing something that's going to potentially set in a chain reaction that could kill all life on the planet eventually, because it seriously can. It seems like one small little thing, and it's one of those things that people can come up with and say, oh, we can do this, and it's going to cause all of these things to happen, and eventually it'll get us where we want to be. But they won't notice, because they're just bees, such a small little thing. But those bees are responsible for making sure that plant life continues. They are so important to everything we have in living on planet Earth. So you have to wonder, why are they knowingly contributing to this?
Yeah, why is there this agenda? And there definitely seems to be, from the information that's out there and the information that, of course, the listeners of the show can certainly get on Google and Google any of this information and find out, there does seem to be some sort of an agenda in place, whether that's from a corporate agenda, a governmental agenda, or from a societal agenda. There definitely is some agenda in place that is causing this to take place, and then the question becomes, what's the outcome? Where does it lead? And it could lead to that doom that we're discussing here. So that brings us to you, Nolo. What is, you've studied this for a long time, and you've heard all kinds of different doom stories, especially in not only on LOP, but tons of other locations that you've done research in. What is your doom? Where do you see this doom going?
Well, I see it as an exponential curve. That if I went to a root cause, that's it. The faster it goes, the faster it goes. And you can apply that across the board to anything. It's like population, all right? There's as many people alive walking the earth now as there had walked the earth in all through human history. Okay, and to take technology, the amount that technology, doubles every half a year? Computer might be every quarter of a year. All of these exponential factors are, I guess, kind of pointed out in biblical prophecy. Now, that was kind of my, somebody suggested biblical doom, and I thought, well, yes, because, it's the elephant in the room. Revelations and the apocalypse, all of that sort of thing points to some sort of overall worldwide doom where something comes to a culmination. Now, if you take that exponential curve and you apply it to, say, government, What we see in governments now is, well, speaking from in the United States, we see us becoming a police state. We see us becoming more authoritarian. That exponential curve applied to government means power is reduced to a single point. Everyone is, of course, trying to get to the top of the heap, but at some point, I think technology is going to enable a single person to have his finger on the button, so to speak, to pull the strings, all of the conspiracies and all the other factors of people pulling this way and that, whether it's someone in a laboratory designing this B virus, and the outcome being what? We want to eliminate population? Well, if you eliminate, you can control the remnant that much easier. So having one person with his finger on the button, there's a hell of a lot of competition for that sort of thing, and that's why we see wars and factions going along. But in a biblical viewpoint, it's going to narrow down to one person. Now, even without the Bible, you can kind of see that sort of pattern establishing itself in society now, that everyone seems to be lost and trying to find their own way, and they're looking for the hero. They're looking for the statesman. They're looking for the solution to pull them out of the pickle that we know that we're in, and that's because of everything going faster and faster, the complexity increasing, which means the problems and their complexity increases. And on top of that all, you have the planet, the crust is expanding, so now you've got volcanoes increasing. You've got the sun, which is a variable star. It's going through a pattern where it's throwing a fit, and that impacts the climate. And the climatic effects does an exponential reverberation on things like crop production, transportation, the energy grid, all of those sorts of things combined. Those sorts of things, I'll say, maybe was predicted in the Bible, or maybe predicted in several other other holy scriptures. And perhaps we've gone through this pattern before, which reflects back on Liberty's hypothesis there, that we've seen this all before.
Well, and you see that it's, when you look at it from the outside, looking in, it's almost as if that there's some hand at play trying to coax this doom, trying to coax, especially when you're thinking about like biblical doom per se. It's almost as if there's some outside source or outside power, if you will, and I hate using that term, that's pushing this kind of biblical doom or theological doom to the forefront to make people see prophecy or see doom from the Bible or even from any other type of religion, whether it's the Quran, the Kabbalah, whatever it happens to be, the Veda, the I Ching, seeing these types of prophecies come forward, it's like they're pushing it that way. Like there's some kind of control factor that's there that's showing us these type of images to make us believe it, not only in mass media but in TV and movies recently.
Very true. And I think the point being is to manipulate. Now, yes, the point is to manipulate the environment for whatever agenda people may have to, they're riding on the coattails of prophecy and perhaps even some trying to make it come about them own selves. But the point of biblical prophecy is simply these things happen to you. In fact, most dooms come upon you without a clue. It's like a thief in the night. It's like the people at Pompeii may have had an indication that the ground's rumbling, but when it suffocated them, poof, it was upon them before they knew it. There's other dooms that are going to be like that the asteroid that we don't see that's coming from behind the sun that hits us. The point of biblical prophecy is simply if there's you can do what you can do, all right? But you can't prepare for every eventuality, or we'd all be living in stainless steel tubes deep under the crust of the earth or something like that. It's to prepare yourself. In other words, to be the human that you should be, not just running around building bunkers and storing seeds, and all of that's well and good, but the point of that prophecy is the inner preparation of the person. So
biblical doom, Rush, What do you see? What do you think? What do you think? Biblical doom, real or not real?
Well, personally, I don't think it's that real because the reality of what's happening right now, working in plastics for over a dozen years, working in metal plating and things like that, we've poisoned ourselves. So is that part of a biblical prophecy? I don't really know because back then they didn't have that kind of technology that we're aware of. So I might be coming off the key on this one, but is that possible? It might be because looking back in history, when people are digging things out of coal, there's a pot in the middle of a coal, 100 feet underground. How is that possible? What was happening that far back that we don't know about, that we're not being told about? But I'm still more of a forward-thinking person when it comes to my prophecies that our destruction is basically bent on ourselves. And I like what Nolo had to say about that too. Is that where's your humanity with all this stuff? I mean, how are you preparing yourself? Because you should be aware of this stuff that's going on around you.
Well, yes, and I think that there's other people that think in that same manner as well. And so, Scarlette, we come to you now, a part of this panel here at LOPvox Radio, and I'm your host, The Ghost Scientist. We thank you for tuning in. Scarlette, how do you see this coming into play? How do you see this biblical doom, if you will, playing out in society today?
Well, I think you see a lot of results for it. I mean, if you listen to any religious show on television, they're telling you about wars and rumors of wars and diseases and disasters. And like you say, they are inflaming it. But there's still a point here, and that is, Nolo is right. We should be preparing ourselves. We cannot physically prepare against every doom that may or may not happen. And there are a good many of them that you can't prepare against at all. If the so-called galactic wave comes in, or if the sun pops off a really huge Y-class flare, we're in big trouble. If the grid collapses in the United States, we could collapse overnight. So how are you going to deal with that if it comes about? You have to psychologically be prepared, and that's the point of studying it.
Oh, agreed. I think you have to, especially when it comes to theological dooms, because there are so many of them, and from not only one specific ideology or one specific concept or religion. If you look at any of them across the board, and it doesn't matter, even if you started with the back in the Aboriginal tribal concepts of what they believe to be future dooms, there's so much information. To be inundated with that information, to research that information, it's sometimes overwhelming, and it could be overwhelming to even those who are the researchers at hand. So, Stormy, where do you see this theological, biblical doom going in this day and age?
Well, first of all, I'm not a big believer in the religious doom, the theological. However, there have always been wars and rumors of wars and disease and death and crime. All of these things have been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. It's no worse. What the difference is now is that we know about more of it because there's instant communication. As far as preparation for this, our whole job in being here is to grow as who we are. Should we be stockpiling ourselves and getting ready for the end so we can survive it? That's not going to suit living. That isn't even being true to the purpose of living on planet Earth. Instead, what we need to do, instead of preparing for the doom in the end, is trying to figure out what ways we can prevent it from happening. We need to start doing the right things and stop doing the wrong things.
Yeah, but is there really a preventative measure to theological doom?
Well, theological doom, no. But is theological doom even real? What theological doom is it takes things that can happen naturally, puts them into that perspective, and ties it into something that controls people and gives them something to fear, which in turn gives them something to hope for as well. So from my perspective, there's not, a big comparison there because I don't really see it as something that's valid.
But isn't theological doom in and of itself a belief system? And belief systems, of course, are it's very hard to debate or argue somebody's belief, and it could be used from the powers to be, or however you want to call them, or whatever name you'd like to put behind them. It could be used in such a manner to contrive a doom of today. Would you not agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, I think that's a big reason why these systems were set up. I think there has always been certain master plans by the people in charge, and, it helps keep people in place. It helps keep the ball rolling in the direction they want to, and get people ready for certain things. When a person is afraid of something happening, they are so much easier to guide in whatever direction you want them to go.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And thank you all you listeners for joining in on LOP Radio. This is LOPvox Live with your host, The Ghost Scientist. And that brings me around to you, Stormy. And the discussion manner of today is about doom, about people's concepts of doom, our panel's concept of doom. And on our panel today we have Liberty, Rush, Scarlette, Nolo, Stormy, and of course myself, The Ghost Scientist, your host. So that brings me right around to you. Stormy, what is your doom story? We're all excited to hear about this. What is the doom that you have?
Well, it's really funny because we were actually just working into that topic just by happenstance. My topic is doom because doom, in my perspective, is actually a tool of control. Doom is something that they use to put fear into people so that people are depressed, so people are stressed. They create doom in politics, and in that people, look at the laws that they're passing right now, and they're using this to make people's lives miserable. And then what happens? Well, then they get to shove drugs down your throat. And what happens with those drugs? Well, those drugs, they make you less healthy. Overall, and then they're pumping all this stuff into your water. Eventually, it is so easy to control the masses, it's not even funny. And it kind of comes around, was it Nolo's doom? About, just a one-person figurehead that's got their finger on the button in the end? Because that's kind of what we're going towards. Because we keep getting people afraid of everything to the point that they get more laws and more control, and we lose more freedom, and they keep telling us we're free, but we're not really free anymore, are we? Look at all of the things we've lost. So we are coming around to this point where there is going to be one person in charge. That new world order, one world government is coming.
Well, and this brings us to doom, like doom itself, the concept of doom, the idea of doom, and selling those concepts and ideas to the mass society as a whole, worldwide, not just only here in North America, but internationally speaking, the concept of sale of doom. So, Rush, how do you see this playing out? Just the sale of doom itself to the populace at large.
Well, Stormy really had a good point on that, is that we're basically being inundated with so much personal destruction, not just based on your family, not just pharmaceuticals, but overall. And as I mentioned before, I've worked in not just the medical field, but like yourself, some scientific fields as well. And when you combine those things, just the deliberation of toxic waste that comes from the iPads. I hope everybody's got one, because you know what? It's cost everybody somebody's health problem, and somebody died to produce that thing. And you're talking about overall doom when it comes to this stuff. Personally, I think that this is being self-created. And Stormy pointed this out earlier. It's like whoever's in charge, as we like to call it, that's controlling the masses, the whole economies of the world as we speak of now, because they've wanted to control that for a long time. And this goes back to the 40s after the World War II. That was their purpose in the first place.
Well, and so we're talking and discussing about the packaging, the corporatization, the marketing and PR of the doom concept as a tool, as a controlling tool or controlling factor. So, Nolo, how do you see this all? How do you see this packaging of doom, if you will?
It's a tool. It can be good or it can be bad. I mean, if you consider stuff like genetic manipulation, well, it'd be nice if you could grow a replacement organ, or you could reconnect a severed spine to cure paralysis. But at the same time, I'm not sure that I want programmed nanobots running through my body with some central command with a kill switch. So it's sort of, they've got to market this thing. I mean, it doesn't arise out of, thin air. So they have to generate money for research, money for development, money for marketing. So we look at some of these things, and it's like with agriculture. Well, all right, now we've got a problem with locust plagues or some kind of shelf fungus or some sort of mite, and so we develop a genetic resistance for it. Well, hooray, we get to feed 1 million more mouths in the African continent. But at the same time, then we find out 3 generations later that it also breaks the DNA strands, and now the sterility rate of humans overall increases. So it's a thing that can go either way. And Doom, just as a marketable device, it sells, all right? Because people want control. I mean, human animals we bring order out of chaos. And to us, chaos is the unknown. And the more that you can control the unknown, the more comfortable you feel. I suppose that's a good way to put it. And if you market a doom where you say, this is the preventative cure for fill in the blank, people will probably be, okay, yeah, But the problem with that is even if you look at the medical ads that run on television, they'll say, well, this cures your arthritis. Now, the drawbacks are weeping of the eyes, stiffness of the limbs, maybe even death and paralysis. So it's kind of a two-edged sword, but what it does do is it instills people a sense of fear. I agree with Stormy on that. A lot of doom is there to instill fear so that you're manipulated, like, you heard the woolly mammoths over the cliff. It's a tool for evil. But then again, it can be a tool for good. It's just marketing in general is overall manipulation. So is that good, benevolent, or is that evil? I tend to think that most things are stampeding us towards that one centralized vision, whether that's a person or a government or an ideal, whatever that one vision is, that we can all do a consensus of reality. And with that in mind, with a unity, we can solve any problem. Well, like I said, it's a two-edged sword. That can also be cage of freedom, and we find ourselves enslaved by our machines or by our genetic manipulations or by our own psychology.
Well, and here, this brings me to Scarlette. Like, how do you see this doom as being doom? Sold the fear, the concept, the idea, and how it is affecting society as a whole.
Well, what I really think is they're going to stampede us the way they want to. I mean, if you look at the average person in the mass media, everyone's concerned with their own interests. Lots of them don't pay attention to what's going on, and they're kind of bewildered when things come down, but they go along with it anyway. The bottom line on this is personal responsibility and self-control. If you see something clearly, you have a responsibility to act in accordance with what you see. And everybody needs to work on themselves inside first and pay attention to what's going on around you. If we all did this, we would all find ourselves acting in concert against these sort of control mechanisms. Everybody is so wound up in themselves that they don't have time to look around and see what's going on. And you really need to do it.
Oh, I concur. I absolutely concur. I think that, oftentimes what you see, especially in society, is this collective subconscious, if you will. This fear that what Stormy was discussing was the concept of fear growing in people and the control factor of that fear and the sale of the fear in accordance to doom itself. And I definitely think it plays a huge part on a psychological level, especially when they're selling these concepts to young people and young people in general. Now, I see Rush is flashing. What do you have something else to add to this?
Well, considering I've been in the medical field for the last 10 years, and I really like the importance that you actually pointed out that point, was that we're psychologically being manipulated. And this is really unfortunate because we're basically trying to, well, not we as a whole, but the media. And I don't want to say our government's doing it, but they are. The NSA, and there's so much manipulation of our lives themselves that people have changed their ways of dealing with these issues on a personal level. I'll give you an example. I had one. But going over the old basis of this, it really it balances out because you're still looking forward to something that's going to be good based on their improvements, so they tell you. So does that give you any improvement? It doesn't really do that, But that's the manipulation that's happening right now.
So, Stormy, now that you've heard everybody else's comments, do you see some points that were made that maybe help you get a better insight into what your concept of doom is?
Oh, for sure. And on Rush's comment about it being government control, it goes beyond government because there's people controlling government as well. So it really goes to the level of the elite. It's always the people with the money. The whole concept of money in itself is a huge form of control. And it's not even the way we did things up until, the Roman era. Up until then, it was a free trade and it was more fair. And you didn't have these huge divisions in class. We didn't have such enormous amounts of poverty that we do now. And I think currency itself was set up as one of those parts of the plan to set this into motion and to put the world, because the more miserable someone is, the more impoverished they is, the harder people have to work their asses off, and they still can't pay their bills. You have people who are working, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, and they're still struggling to make their electric bill. This is what's happening. When you have this happening, you've got enormous amounts of stress. It carries over into personal lives. It makes the people weaker and easier to control.
Well, see, I find it interesting that your specific doom story, because it really comes into my doom story, and I specifically wanted to go last, not because I thought my doom was any better than any of your dooms. I just felt that in order to get the doom that I wanted to lay out, because I was specifically asked by the group, Ghost, what is your doom? You're like, where do you see doom going, and how do you see the doom playing out? Unfortunately, the doom that I'm going to lay out before you is doom that I had firsthand experience in when I was in the military, when I was serving in the U.S. Army as an officer. So it was something that brought me to all of you. It was actually something that brought me to ATS, to GLP, to LOP, to the Channy Project, to all of these other places, and trying to find a home, and of course finding a home with all of you here at LOP and here at LOPvox. So, and by the way, the invitation into coming in and being part of you guys' group, and the welcome that I received from all of you, being so open-minded about some of the information that I've presented and some of the information that I've been putting out, as well as really enjoying and finding a lot of fruit, if you will, a low-hanging fruit off the tree, that being all of you coming forward with the research and ideas and concepts that you all have brought to the table. So that brings me around to my doom, okay? My doom starts in August of 1965 during the Watts riots. Okay, so in 1965, the Watts riots take place, and because of the Watts riots, in November of 1965, there was a plot that was written, a governmental action that was written called Operation Garden Plot. This operation was strategically written in order to take away the powers, the law enforcement powers of local law enforcement on site, and then relinquishing those law enforcement powers over to military control, and having military step in and take over the law enforcement and basically the control of mass society. And in March 21st of 1983, because it was suspended at that time. Okay, so Operation Garden Plot is written. It's put into action during that year of 1965. It's then suspended in 1969, except it was never decommissioned. The official Operation Garden Plot is still on the books, and it's still being used to this day. It was simply deactivated. But in March 21st of 1983, the Soviets wrote this thing called Invading the Human Mind, okay? And it was a press release article by some journalists that we're not really sure of from Australia who released it to the International Press Club. When this was released in March of 23rd of 1983, Ronald Reagan signs the Defense Initiative Act, okay, dubbed Star Wars program, headed up by DARPA, contracted through Halliburton, KBR, JPL, and L&L, and many other defense contractors. Then in 1984, Ronald Reagan signs in Rex 84. And Rex 84 is written by Oliver North using Garden Plot as a stepping stone, as it was still in effect and never taken off the books. So in November of 1986, you have Oliver North, who gets a change of heart, if you will, writes a memo to the Commander-in-Chief stating that his intentions of releasing the plans of Rex 84 out to the public. So in 1987, you have the Iran-Contra affair takes place. As Oliver North was going to all of this information about him writing Rex 84, his involvement is brought forward in the Iran-Contra affair, which was drugged up basically to discredit him as a witness to the Rex 84 and his involvement in writing the document to begin with. Then you have May of 27th of 1988. You have the Senate, ratifies the INF Treaty, the first arms control agreement since 1972, which was the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, or SALT I approval. And this ratification of the 72 Treaty once again paves the way of the military-industrial complex to funnel congressional dollars directly to dumb bases around the country. These being deep underground military bases construction contracts, and all these were all given to Halliburton Industries and their subsidiary KBR, who actually they end up taking over and owning, by the way, as a sister company, to supply all the construction of the said bases in hand. Then in 1989, you've got January of that year, takes office of the presidency, begins to form SHIELD, okay? Then you have August of 1990, you got Desert Shield ensues, culminating in the first deployment. The forces of Desert Storm, January 1991, this allows once again the reenactment of Operation Garden Plot by PBB, that being the Operation Garden Plot Project Bluebeam, and lays in the foundation to induce civil disobedience. They wanted to induce the civil disobedience through the use of the Terrorist Act. So here you got April 1991, Operation Desert Saber, which most people don't even know that existed. And this lays the foundation for the support to Al-Qaeda through the Bush family, connection directly to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda as a leader. It is important to note that at this time, the foundation of the CIA director, that being George Bush Sr., his involvement directly with the family and the formation of Al-Qaeda in general, okay? And then you have this Saber, this Operation Saber that takes place with the Canadian government, and it's Operation Friction. and the Canadian government who lended a strategic hand to putting forward these operations, or the Operation Friction, and the Canadian government support of the Al-Qaeda itself, but yet none of that information has ever leaked out to the out to the public. Then in 1992, you got leaked documentations of Operation Friction, OGP, the PBB, is handed over to Serge Monast. Now, Serge Monast, spelled Sergemonast, is an investigative journalist, and his partner get this source material. Then 2 years later, he does the investigation. 1993, Bill Clinton takes office. Clinton was not in support of the OGP-BBP plan, and then the plans are then made to discredit his character and reputation to lay the foundation for Bush Jr. to take office and continue with the CIA op his father, originally began to begin with. Then you have the first public announcements of OGP-BBP at 1994. You got Serge Monast again, reveals for the first time PBB, that being Project Bluebeam, the transcript of which the interview of itself was done through the International Press Club. So in 1995, that brings us to the 95 section, as all of the groundwork is put into place to demonize terrorism and the word terrorists, Desert Storm is brought to a close. And then 1996, you got Serge himself, the writer, Serge Monast himself, and his co-writer, who are then mysteriously die to congenital heart failure within 2 days of each other, mind you, and neither one of them ever had a heart problem, never had any history to heart problem. Then January 2001, you got Bush Jr. takes office. Dick Cheney, former CEO of Halliburton, puts into place the vice president, right? This is very important to notice. Cheney is the real puppet master in the following events. These are the following events that come forward. So in January of 2001, you have this Bush and Cheney collaboration. Then in September 10th of 2001, a really interesting thing happens. Donald Rumsfeld announces the mysterious loss of $2.3 trillion from the U.S. Defense Fund. Let me say that again. In 2001, this is September 10th, the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld comes forward and announces the loss of $2.3 trillion from the U.S. Defense Fund. That's really important because following that date, there was no mention ever of this $2.3 trillion. Then on September 11th, you've got, this 9/11 takes place. Then October 24th, 2001, Osama bin Laden becomes deathly ill and is brought by U.S. military escort into Dubai. This is 3 days later, on October 27th of 2001, Osama bin Laden is pronounced dead. He is pronounced dead to the Arab nation. With his entire family in attendance at his funeral, the MSM squashes it, all mentioned through the NSA directive Operation Calypso. The bad guy has been chosen, if you will, that being Osama bin Laden, and the CIA goes into full swing, headed up by the National Reconnaissance Office, that being NRO. So, November 2001, you got Operation Anthrax, which is put into play. This is Amorthrax, deemed by FBI, is put into play to further distract the public from pushing for any real investigations into these actions, into the government actions of 9/11. Then October 2001 through 2003, you got Halliburton and KBR. They lay the plans for this Iraqi war, a strategic operation to further the decline of the U.S. dollar. Then in 2002, you got the Department of Homeland Security. They found and create SLTT, the Fusion Center bill. This places 72 fusion centers around the country, which, by the way, most people don't know, are not governmentally run. They have no congressional mandate, but yet they're funded by government funding. They're funded by your tax dollars. Then in March of 2003, you got the first official troops deployed to begin the Iraqi war. You got December 18th of 2003, you got the Hobbs Lab loses a shipment container of 4 different strains of influenza. Mind you, 4 different strains of influenza lost by the Hobbs Lab. Mind you, Hobbs Lab is owned by Halliburton. July 2004, we get the first known case of H1N1 reported in Canada. Initial strain of H1N1 showed to be derived from, guess what? 4 separate strains of influenza. And isn't that strange that it never gets leaked directly to Hobbs or Halliburton? So now you got 2005, KBR is given U.S. Army contract to construct 800 internment facilities around the country to be run by Halliburton EEG Internment. 800 plus of these locations are built. January 2009, you got Barack Obama sworn into office, right? He's the 44th President of the United States. This is the last stage in the setup of the launch of OGP, that being Operation Garden Plot, and Project Bluebeam on the American public. March of 2009, you got the CDC puts out a pandemic report with biological warfare to begin the process of superbugs, antibacterial, and antibiotic-resistant bug strains. These being influenza, several modes of modality, widespread and fast-acting, extremely useful in the terms if you're trying to push the public into, again, what Stormy was talking about, fear, the process of fear. So 2009 till 2014, which brings us to the present, you've got H.R. Bill 645, which is the Secretary of Homeland Security would be in charge and suspend all presidential powers across the board. He creates the Council of Governors, which is 10 regions, 10 separate regions, that will be only upholdent to the executive of the United States, that being the President of the United States. Meaning no matter what order that the President signs into play, these governors who you did not vote for are hand-chosen, hand-picked to choose which executive orders get passed and which ones don't. Then now you have the CDC, and they're just currently putting out the formation of H5N1, and now, God forbid, we have H7N9. And this little bug is some of the nastiest things you can possibly imagine in a populous society when you cannot use antibiotics to get rid of it. And here we are at the present with only a glimpse at which doom is to come. And not sure which of it will be the culprit, right? But we don't know where this doom is going to take us. But I can tell you what, several players either discredited or outright killed by the mysterious causes that took place during this apparition from 1965 till now. Because, of course, they don't want any of you to believe any of this stuff. So you make up your own mind as to the doom that follows, the doom that follows to you. Where do you see your doom going? And I'd like to open this up now to the panel. So here you go. I'm going to start out with Rush, right off the bat. Rush, what do you think about my doom?
We just lost Rush. I'm sorry. We're trying to get him back.
Oh, okay, so Nolo, where do you see my doom? How do you see my doom played?
I'm just wondering, are there any power brokers that are quote unquote on our side? No. I mean, is there any white hat out there? Is there any constitutionalists in the military that are saying, we have got to come up with a counter plan of our own? It just can't be the little guy down here saying we're being steamrollered by this. It seems to me that there should be some sort of, I wouldn't say organized group, but, just from my experience in the U.S. Navy, and their kind of foundation, their intrusions into the Secret Service kind of a thing, that they had basically, protect and serve in mind. I'm just wondering, is there any, hope out there in the fact that as we're being tumbled by all these forces, is there anything that you can see on the horizon that might be a ray of hope?
Well, from a personal standpoint, in 2003, when I resigned my commission, I resigned because I saw this coming. I could see it played out, and I saw with my own eyes the plans that were being laid out. Because I was reading the FM manuals. I mean, we were getting them as briefings. And when I started to read some of these manuals and started to ask the higher ups, my CO above me and the COs above him, like, what is this FM manual exactly pointing out, and how do we lay this out to the troops? And how do you get the troops to agree to do some of the things in these FM manuals? I mean, if you guys want a real huge eye-opener, simply, do a little bit of research on an FM manual 3-49-.04. It will blow your mind. And this is an actual field manual, an Army field manual given out to the troops during the middle stages of the Iraqi war. And telling them, when you come home, when you get back here, be prepared to start taking up arms against American citizens. Now, why in the world would you create a field manual from the standpoint of an officer? Why would you come up with a field manual that would push this towards getting troops, today's troops, to go against their own citizenry? And then you, of course, have to look at the three generals. You ask if there's anybody that would really like to stand up. Why do you think Obama had to get rid of the three generals he just got rid of? Do you really think it's the simple scandals that they tried to put forward to society? Absolutely not. Take a look at the positions of the three generals in charge that he got rid of. All three of them are all in charge of nuclear arms or in nuclear reaction, or they have something to do with transportation or logistics or the security thereof of nuclear spent weaponry. So you have to ask the question, why would you want to eliminate the guys who have been doing their job so diligently for so many years, who are in charge of this stuff, who are keeping track of it, when they're telling you, no, you're not going to take a warhead. No, you're not going to take these spent U-32 rounds. No, you're not going to take fissible material and transport it illegally or unsecurely across the country. So I think there are people who are in a strategic power. I think there are people and officers and military personnel, and I also think there's some really good people, believe it or not, even inside of Homeland Security. I've worked with some of them. I mean, I was an instructor for quite a while down in Grenada, Mississippi at the National Training Center, and I can tell you I met a lot of guys, a lot of men and women who were in charge of their positions that both said the same thing. Why are we doing all of this? Where is it all going? And when I got woken up to that doom, it scared the living hell out of me, to tell you the truth. It really did. It scared me because I looked at it as, this is something that they are in control of, and how exactly is society going to stop them, if you will, from rolling this out? How? It's not as simple as somebody, I know every time I've had a lecture about this or a talk about this, I've had people tell me, we got guns. Okay, so you got guns. I got news for you. The guns that you possess, or the guns that you think you may possess, you have no idea about the technology, the modern technology of the United States military. You don't know. You don't understand it. And anyone that has sat and watched an Apache longbow in action, okay, an Apache gunship in action, when you've seen one of these live, just one, you won't be sitting in your house thinking about, oh, I've got rifles, I've got automatic rounds, I've got automatic ammunition. You won't. And if you do, then you just, there's something mentally wrong with you. So I think that the real concern or the real doom facing society today is this doom that's brought on by our own government. That's governmental doom. And I think, just like Stormy was saying, that it's pushing us towards this end result. And I don't really think any of us want to know what that result is, sincerely.
I think the key is it's subsuming of your will. It's to put everybody on the same page, so to speak, to have this one vision imposed on everyone, whether that means you're dumbed down chemically, or it means you're indoctrinated socially, or it means you're just basically conscripted and enslaved, so that you have no ability to question orders or to question what's going on around you. This I see ties into the biblical aspect of doom. It's a battle of the will. It's whoever is in control, whatever name you want to put to it or concept you want to put to it, it has a vested interest in enslaving. The system is eat or be eaten. The system is to use you like little dynamos to produce either food or energy for it. And it's the hive mentality that you work for the good of society, not society work for the good of the individual. I see this as the great dichotomy here. And it's if they can take over your will or get you to surrender your will, either it's through dumbing down entertainment television, or it's targeted commercials, or it's the education system, or the political choices that you're handed that you artificially choose between. I think all of that is to rob us of our will.
Oh, and I absolutely agree with you. I think it is to rob. I think it is to depress, if you will, society as a whole, so you'll accept it. Because the depression, getting people in that depressed state, and I think it goes along with constantly inundating them with disaster, with these massive apocalyptic things that are taking place worldwide, and blowing them out of proportion in such a way that it creates this fear factor. Because if you're going to go in and take over a people's, if you will, or a society, you have to program them for that. You have to get them prepared to take their master's will, if you will. You know, it's kind of like, I hate to bring this up, but it's kind of like creating a slave mentality where you would have to whip them into submission. And I think that's currently what they're trying to do with society today. They're trying to get to that point of whipping society into submission, so that when they roll out this plan, this Operation Garden Plot Project Bluebeam plan, and of course right now we're at the middle stages, if you will, of this creating this term terror or terrorism, and creating doom around it, strategic doom around that. And then on top of that, taking it to the next level, which will be, let's create a villain, someone else to be a villain now that, it's official that Osama bin Laden, on their quote-unquote terms, is no longer the villain. They have to create a new villain. And what better villain to create than a villain that they have no control over? And of course, you got to have that villain, so the villain has technology that we can't combat. Whether it's contrived or not makes no difference, which then brings you to the Project Bluebeam operation and talking about the alien agenda and utilizing the alien agenda to play on society's fears. And I see that more and more over the course of the last 2 years, even 3 years or so, of them inundating us with movies based on alien races on the moon, and them coming down and creating technologies or utilizing technology against the mass population, or eliminating the mass population in some way. So if you create that villain that they can no longer say, hey, we have no control over this, what can we do? And at the same time, in the background, what you're not paying attention to is this operation has already been in play since the late 60s, and you have technology in place, such as the Star Wars program that, by the way, was funded, was put into place, and is currently in operation. And a technology, mind you, that can be used in such a way that would look like and mimic that of an alien invasion or an alien destruction, a destructive weapon. And you could play off of that, especially with the holographic technologies that we have, them doing these aerial attacks. What I mean by aerial attacks being chemtrailing and putting a superconductive material in the high atmosphere that you can bounce light beams off of, which make it very easy to mimic any kind of a holographic ship or a vessel, if you will, which I've heard before. Those types of dooms, I think, are being constructed in such a manner now that they're being packaged, they're being marketed, they're being PR'd directly to the psyche of society, the mental, the American society as a whole. So, Scarlette, how do you see this coming about? How do you follow the doom, my doom, if you will?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's going to be difficult to oppose it, to be honest with you, because you can see that the agenda in the United States is to push us under the control of the United Nations, which ultimately will end up in the hands of one person. And how to stop this, I am not sure. But I would never count the American people out, because we're always underestimated. And if you look at the reaction after the 9/11 incident, the country was pretty much at each other's throats before that happened. We unified overnight. Oh, I live in a rural area. Overnight, everyone had a flag. It was on their porch, it was on their flagpole, or it was on their car. But when the country is attacked and when they become aware of it, we unite instantly, and this is our great strength.
Oh, I think it is, and I think that now I think that we all, as a group, and I know that we're, I hate to say this, that we're not normal, but in essence, we're not the norm of society. We aren't. We of course here have woken up to some of these events and some of these concepts, and we've done research on these events and these concepts, so we have a little bit bigger or better understanding, if you will, because we're not looking at mainstream. And I think it will take all of us as a whole to intellectually and strategically start waking people up to these events, because they don't know the history of these events, because they're not being given the ability to see them, if you will. Their politicians aren't talking about it. Of course, they're part of the problem. Their society as a whole is part of the problem, because it has this closed eye, closed mentality kind of appeal, where people just want to put their heads down in the sand. They just want to look at the floor. They want to look at their feet. They want to continue on and look at the person that may be standing next to them. And you even notice that now in grocery stores or going shopping. I mean, go to your average Walmart and just go shopping and ask the average person standing, hey, you ever use this product? They literally will look at you with the deer in the headlight look, like, oh my God, you're actually talking to me? I don't even know you. So with that type of mentality, it's very difficult to get these types of concepts or these kind of ideas, whether they be contrived or not, into the public, into the public's perception. Excuse me. So, Stormy, where do you see my doom story coming? And I apologize for the coughing.
Well, as far as our military, and I know they've been planning this for a long time, but when they want to start implementing this to where they start using our military against their own people, I think they've got another thing coming. And I think they probably know that, which is probably why some of these generals were fired, because they're not willing to do, in the end, what their final goal is to do. When it comes to our military, most of these young men that we have went into the military because idealistically they wanted to be heroes. They wanted to do something to defend our country. And granted, some of them are in there because maybe they didn't have any other options, or maybe some of them are on a power trip. But a good deal of the men and boys that we have in the military right now are there because they feel somehow what they're doing is the right thing to do, and they're protecting their family, their loved ones, their friends. They are not. It doesn't matter whether it's under fear of court-martial. They're not going to turn on their families, their brothers, their friends because they're told to. It's just not going to happen. So as far as that happening, that's a big, big flaw in their plan, and they're going to run into it sooner or later when they try to implement this. As far as the UFO invasion thing goes, hopefully most people are smart enough not to fall for this if they actually try to get this going. I think we've had as much experience, in our ancient past to know that while there are probably several different races visiting the planet, we have some that have hands down helped us in multiple ways. Did they help us for a reason? Maybe. Maybe there were some species that were fighting against us. However, we do know that there are some species, as my ancestors were rescued during different cataclysms by extraterrestrials. So we can't fall into the idea that they're going to be a doom to us.
Well, and I see this in their documentation, especially with what they're putting out to the public, and how they're playing out on national news, how this information is getting out to society. Because again, you're not talking about a process of education. Okay, you're not talking about trying to educate the public. What you're talking about is the indoctrination of society. They are indoctrinating the society as a whole, and this is not just a North American thing. This is internationally. This is a worldwide attack, if you will, on society's psyche, and getting them to see this as a fear factor. So when they do roll out their plans, when they do decide to come forward and start really implementing this, and I think the key to this whole entire thing, or the key to this specific doom, is going to be a pandemic, a CDC-contrived pandemic, and something that I'm afraid, seriously, they won't be able to control. You know, they have this concept that if they get this out in society, that they can control the modality, because they've been testing it. They've been seeing, can we keep it in one specific location? Can we keep these mortality rates of the areas in which we're implementing these? Can we keep them controlled? Can we keep them confined so that the mass majority of the population doesn't get affected by this? But I think in turn from them doing this kind of thing, that eventually they won't be able to control it. They won't be able to control the outcome. And I think that's their downfall. Their downfall will be, even though that they're capable of going into their DOMs, even though they're capable of going into their compounds, and we're not talking about just government officials. We're talking about Buffett and the conglomerate group in Africa, and these groups now that you see that are popping up that are building these strategic locations that are hermetically sealed with all the goodies that they think they're going to need. You know, I don't see that being a safety net for them. Although they believe it will be a safety net, I don't see that. So I think unofficially they think they're in control, but officially they're really not. You know, they don't have this control that they believe they do. And I think this brings it full circle, because we started out at the beginning of this program with historical doom. You know, Liberty brought forward this historical doom, and then, you know, you get all these other dooms that come forward, not only being bee doom and being this doom of pollination of plants and food doom, and then you've got fear doom and doom itself, and then theological doom, and all of these dooms kind of coming together. And I think the reason why so many people are confused about it is because by the time they get to this, by the time they get through all this information, it's so contrived and so confusing and so complicated that they just can't accept that it's sheer doom. You see what I mean? It's doom itself that's causing all of it. So here we are, we're at the bottom of the hour. I would love to thank all of the listeners that have come here and started listening to LOP Radio. This, of course, is LOPvox Live. I'm your host, The Ghost Scientist. I have my guests here that are part of our roundtable. If you're joining in now, at the top of our list, we had Liberty, Rush, Scarlette, Nolo, Stormy, and, of course, myself, The Ghost Scientist, your host. And we're going to take a 2-minute break at the bottom of the hour so that, of course, Liberty can get set up for phone calls and call-ins. You will, of course, be able to get on the phone and ask us questions, and you can ask any of the panel members that are currently on board to answer any of the questions that you may have. So right now we're going to take a 2-minute break. We hope to see you guys back in 2 minutes, and please make your phone calls now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LOPvox Live. I'm your host, the Ghost Scientist, here on LOP Radio, and we thank you for staying tuned to the show and tuning in today. Our show was about doom and about what doom meant to all of us and our panel of guests. And the panel of guests that we had on our roundtable today is Liberty, Rush, Scarlette, Nolo, Stormy, and myself, of course, your host, the Ghost Scientist. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in. There's going to be lots of information that we're going to be putting out over the next coming weeks. We plan on doing this as a regular program. We thank all of you for tuning in. We hope some of the information that we gave out was educational, of course, informative, and hey, at least it could be entertaining, right? So we really appreciate all your support. We plan on doing this every single Sunday. This will be live every Sunday. We're going to have panel guests. We're going to try to get all kinds of different guests from LOP at lunaticoutpost.com. That again is lunaticoutpost.com. Check us out. There's forums there. You might find some very interesting reads, and we're going to try to pick some of the brains of the people that are posting and try to get them as part of our panel and making a panel discussions around some of those concepts and ideas. And look, it's going to be about all kinds of stuff. We're going to put out information about conspiracies, both modern and future. We're going to also be putting out information theologically, scientifically, philosophically. These are all kinds of concepts and ideas that we've been playing around with. And we hope to make this a steady program. We hope to bring this forward. And if you would like to do a call-in right now, because we've got spots available for you to call in and ask questions, please call the number 646-652-2446. That number again is 646-652-2446. Please call in now, and we'll take you live on air. And until then, I still would like to open it up again. And we've got a couple minutes before we get another call-in. Would any of you like to make suggestions? Maybe some ideas about future shows or some ideas about future concepts that the panel could discuss?
Well, let me just interject a reflection on what we've already, heard about dooms and such. It's sometimes set up an artificial problem and then provide an artificial solution for it. So I read a science fiction book a while back called City by Clifford Simak, and society was stagnating. It was having its problems. The solution that was presented to the society, there was a couple of them, but one of them, very interesting, it reminds me of transhumanism, is that they were able to download the people's personality into a chip, bury the chip safely under a tremendously secure bunker in Switzerland, and program the chip basically like paradise. And about a third of humanity went into these microchips. Now, it sounds ideal. You can program away war, poverty, hunger, disease, pain, anything that you want can be programmed into the chip. Now, just from reflections of reading, transhumanism and a lot of other far out there ideas, is the escape from reality into a world of your own design. I think at some point, all of these dooms, which are hurting us in a direction, I'm not sure which direction they're trying to corral us into, but whatever direction may end up in a confined space like a microchip. And you may think that you're going into your own private, paradise, but it may be, just like Matrix predicted, you're simply hooked into some sort of psychic generator and fed off of by your overlords for the rest of eternity or whatever it may be. The point being is that a doom may be there to stampede you into a solution that they devise that you look at and say, that makes sense. Let's go that direction. And actually, it's a trap. So for some dooms, that's why I say internal preparation is probably the best recourse against doom. Is if you're settled in your own spirit and you're grounded on a proper foundation, any of these dooms, whether there's the the continents start drifting or the meteors start raining or whatever, that you're the best human that you can be, and that's the whole point of being human.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think it is the best part of being human. And I think also that, you bring up some valid points, if you will. And, hey, I see that E just joined us here, Entropy. What happened to you earlier, man? I mean, we were expecting to have you part of this panel of discussion, and I know you're going to be part of the panels to come. It's good to see you're in the room, and hey, what do you got to talk about? We're talking about Doom. You've heard the Doom stories, so what kind of Doom you got?
Well,
and it looks like he's having technical problems. There we go. We got him now. So, yeah, Entropy, so what's going on, man? What kind of Doom you got? Give us some Doom.
I think the Doom is, like Stormy said, we're all distracted. There doesn't have to be an enemy. You already have two enemies right now being demonized by the media daily, conservatives and liberals. Two things that are blamed for every problem in the country.
So political Doom.
I would say it's plutocratic Doom. I don't think there's any foreign operation going on. It's big business, and big business is a global entity.
So where do you see this corporate Doom taking us?
Sorry, Ghost, you had to point me out
Well,
there. But go ahead.
Well, you were asking why members of the military aren't involved with various things to oppose whatnot. Members of the military were very involved with Occupy Wall Street. You had Occupy Marines. In Oakland, before it was infiltrated by thugs, you had the sailor holding up the Constitution in front of the police, firing tear gas, reminding them of who they worked for. The first person wounded by the plutocratic police force was a Marine. He was hit in the head with a distraction device launched from a 40-millimeter gas launcher. You had the captain of the police of Philadelphia, Ray Lewis, who was very vocal in supporting the action in New York City and arrested for doing so. The movement was infiltrated. It was demonized in the media by political hotwords, socialists, hippies, communists. All those little hot words that people seem to get so fired up about. It was also infiltrated by every special interest group imaginable that took no control whatsoever from the government, and it was infiltrated by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. You're talking about fighting the power. Well, in order to fight the power, a movement needs not just momentum, but it needs to stay on topic. How do you stay on topic when the media is telling people what you stand for instead of your true message? When they're demonizing the movement? When the movement itself is compromised? In order for us to get over the control of the real elite, who are neither the godless liberals, conservatives, or libertarians, but a cross-section of everyone. And in some cases, we're not just talking about America here, we're talking about the entire planet has to be united for one specific goal. How do you do that when your news organizations, which are private enterprises, are in bed with the same people that are lobbying your government, selling legislation to the highest bidder? How do you develop an effective countermeasure to that? My doom is we'll never find one because we're too busy fighting each other.
So we got our first caller on the line. Caller, go ahead. What's your question?
No, I didn't have a question. I'm sorry. I was just going to give my idea of doom. My thoughts were that everything that we've been seeing going on is the doom. Like to me, it's the race-specific viruses that are going around, like the MERS in the Saudi Arabia area. That we got the swine flu in the North American area. We got the bird flu, which is Asian. And I also think that the pneumonic plague plays into it in Madagascar, and we got just everything that you can possibly conceive of. I think is the doom. It's all connected. And, if we just take a step back and look at it, we can see the pattern there. anyway, that's my thing, and that's what I wanted to call in about. Anyway, thanks.
No, and thank you for calling in. That was Puss in Boots calling in on the phone there, giving her concepts of what doom is and what she feels the current doom is. And I think that's fantastic that all of these thoughts and ideas, because there are so many thoughts and ideas, because there are so many different types of doom that we all get inundated by every day. And we see this happening to ourselves on a daily basis, and sometimes we're not really sure how to react to them. We're not sure what to do, and so it looks like I got a new call. I'm not sure who it is yet. Hold on one second. I'm reading the screen, folks. I apologize. This is our first time on air. Who's the caller?
It's Irie.
Irie.
Thank you, Irie, for joining in on LOPvox. What do you got? What's your comment? What's your question?
Well, I have a quick comment and a question. I guess first comment is thanks to all of you and the panel for the show. It's great. I hope you guys keep doing it. The doom that interests me is the animal deaths, and one of the things that was touched upon, the multiple animal deaths and effects on oxygen, in particular phytoplankton, and as Scarlette mentioned, that the oceans are more or less the lungs of the planet. But in regards to animal deaths and the bee doom, what are Scarlette or whoever else's thoughts on pollution versus electromagnetic frequencies that are in the air?
Well, he brings up a good point, and he's talking about how these pollutants, if you will, that are being dispersed, or these type of pollutants that are being dispersed, have interactions with high energy or electron flow that's currently happening in our upper atmosphere. So, any of you guys, any of the panel members would anybody like to queue up and try to answer, or at least give some of your thoughts on it, Erie?
When you have all these mass die-offs in the animals, it's signifying that the climate is changing drastically, and I'm not talking about the global climate doom that everyone speaks of. I'm talking about the way they're being pushed out of their niches and they're dying. That's going to happen to a lot of us too.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think it's going to start hitting the populace at large. It's going to start hitting us, as hominoids living on this planet. Nolo, what do you think about what Erie had to say?
Yeah, that was my comment. Yeah, electromagnetic is definitely, I would put that like the cell phone towers. I would definitely put that in the category of a manipulation of the extinction of species, for whatever design they have in mind. It may be the pharmaceutical company. They have an instant solution they're willing to sell us to solve the problem that they may have created in the first place. Some of them are maybe... to be able to point fingers more directly is a little harder, like, say, the Fukushima problem with the radiation poisoning. That one may be a little harder to say, well, that was manipulated into happening. But I'm sure they were well aware of the consequences of what would happen if there was a disaster. Now, whether that was designed or not, I don't know. The more I read into it, the more suspicious I become, because delving into it, they already had an emergency on their hand before the tidal wave hit. There was some subtle things that happened, like some of the switches they had, or they're powered by, I think, a 2-volt battery, something like that. Well, they didn't have any of those on hand, and yet 50 miles away they had a warehouse full of them. Well, because of the lack of the battery, they couldn't shut off certain valves, and then the meltdown happened. Well, it's like, well, that was preventable. Why didn't they have the battery backups? Now, was that manipulation on somebody's part and hoping to exploit something that may happen, or Did they have something else designed, and the tidal wave, etc., was just a fortunate circumstance for them? I don't know. You have to wonder. But, it's not like anybody's going to publish a manifesto and tell you, we're pushing you in this direction because. We can only draw inferences. And I suppose a lot of this panel is, we're trying to decide exactly why are they pushing us? What is this? Of course, the meteor strikes us. That's a doom that's outside of our hands. But the dooms by our own design, what's going on here? That can be preventable, and that's what we have a discussion for, is what are the things we can take steps to prevent our own created dooms?
Oh, agreed. And so, Scarlette, I mean, do you have a comment, or would you like to comment about Erie's doom, if you will?
I'm sorry, I was a bit distracted at the moment, but everything he said is quite legitimate. There's been a lot of talk about we're starting another mass extinction, and this is the beginning of it. And you can certainly see extinctions dropping. And as our technology is going up, they're increasing. It seems like cause and effect. I don't know if it is.
Well, certainly cause and effect has something to do with it, and especially when you're looking at so many different influences. Stormy, would you like to comment about Erie's doom?
Sure. I think one of the things we need to look at is why we're having these mass extinctions, and of course some of them are due to pesticides. We could have some due to chemtrails. With the magnetic field, we have to kind of question and wonder why it's so far out of whack. Obviously, our magnetic field is just completely off kilter. It could be because we're in the middle of a magnetic pole shift, which does happen periodically. But we've also had so much going on with HAARP, and we really don't know fully what they're doing with HAARP. So we don't know if they have possibly damaged our magnetic field by all the messing around that they do. And so that's kind of something that we really need to look at and try to understand better, is why we have these deaths. Were they caused intentionally? Are they a side effect? How did the damage to the magnetic field come about?
Well, and of course we have we had a little panel this time around, but no one brought up HAARP doom. No one brought up the concepts of HAARP doom, or even brought up the ideas of magnetic earth dooms, like the resonating fields that we're currently hearing, like the big booms and the tectonic plate shifting that we're currently getting, or the shifting of the magnetic pole, over 376 miles in the last 6 to 8 years, and the changing of the azimuths themselves, and the thermal doom and winter doom, and all these different, the vortex, this solid winter typhoon ice doom, There's all kinds of dooms. But I see that here in our chat channel, live on LOP, here at Lunatic Outpost, Cass asks, in regards to what Stormy was saying about the military not turning against their family members and friends, do you not believe they are considering this by turning families against one another with poverty and hunger? Electronics and rebellionists, most families have both mother and father working full-time if both parents are involved in the children's lives. So his question basically is, do you think they're trying to turn the family against each other to help with this concept, or with this whole idea of doom, if you
will? Well, I would disagree with that.
Most definitely.
I'm sorry, Stormy. Go ahead.
I was just saying, most definitely. I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, people using poverty as one of those tools that they are to control people. Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, they kind of are using poverty and things like that to turn people against each other, because when people are so knocked down, when they're constantly stressed and worried about everything, and no matter what they do, they can't make it work, it causes a person's nerves. I mean, the hormones and everything goes completely out of whack, and yes, it does turn people against each other. So they could be using that as one of their weapons, for sure. Most definitely. That's an excellent point. Thank you, Kat.
Bill. Then, Rush, you wanted to chime in and make a comment about what Katz had to say.
Well, but I disagree with Stormy because we're talking about families here. I mean, that's really kind of degrading the whole family aspect of things. And personally, I don't approve of that. A lot of that has to do with the fact that so many men and women come back and their families are dilapidated, seriously, with the faction of war itself. And what is that coming from? It's coming from, the upper echelons trying to manipulate the whole world structure and stuff. So, it's, I guess I'm in the same boat with Stormy when it comes to that, but still, it's still coming from the upper echelons, and they're basically driving families right into the ground.
That brings me to Nolo. Where do you what do you think? Do you think there's something to all of this, or do you have some final thoughts or ideas?
Well, yeah, it's definitely, it's conditioning. And the conditioning may be, sub rosa. In other words, to pick apart what exactly sort of conditioning it is, I don't know. Give a quick example. UFO phenomena with Jacques Vallée. He states that he feels UFO phenomena is, what he can reduce it to is a manipulation of a mindset, that it's to put you in a certain frame of mind. So as long as humans are involved, it's conditioning.
Well, it's conditioning from not only your children, but from the school system, from governmental approaches to schooling, no longer being that of education and indoctrination. From a personal standpoint, my wife and I decided to homeschool our son, and he was, according to them, he was uneducatable. He had very poor grades. He couldn't keep up with his schoolwork. We took him out of school last year and started him homeschooling this year, and so far he's been a straight A student. And my question to them was, well, you say that my kid is uneducatable, but yet he's in homeschooling and he's getting straight A's and doing extremely well, and he's doing AG classes, pre-prep college classes, and getting credit for them. So, I see how that affects the family from my standpoint of it, for sure. And I would just like to point out, we're at the end of the program, folks. I appreciate everybody calling in. This is a LOPvox Live with your host, the Ghost Scientist, and your panel of guests. I would like to put a huge thank you out to Liberty, Rush, Scarlette, Nolo, Stormy, and of course Entropy, and hey, to everybody else, Katz, Puss in Boots, for calling in. You guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys being part of the show. We really appreciate everything that you guys have done for us and everything else. And we're going to leave this with the intro, and we'll see you guys here again next Sunday, LOPvox Live. Thank you very much, and as always, good journey.